Okay, let's get comfy. Let's get comfy. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to sit down and film a video talking about my top 5 favorite classics that are pre-20th century. So favorite classics that were like earlier than the 20th century. You all get the point. So when I sat down to write my list, I came up with 7. So I'll mention all 7 to you, but I have decided on 2 being honorable mentions, and I'll just tell you the titles and not talk about them too much. I do have a top 5 that are in no particular order. So yeah, the 2 honorable mentions that I have, the first one is The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. I read this a couple of years ago. I really love The Scarlet Letter, and I'm surprised that I love The Scarlet Letter because I hadn't heard any good things about it online. I mean, other than it being a classic that appears on all those like books you should read before you die lists, I hadn't heard any real readers online speaking ardently of it. Everyone seemingly had a negative opinion of The Scarlet Letter, so I thought, I did not know what to expect. I didn't think I would like it, certainly not as much as I did. The writing is the most poetic, beautiful writing ever. It has so many beautiful messages in that book about taming the self, about hypocrisy, about conforming to society, about rigid rules in society. I really, really loved The Scarlet Letter, so I'd recommend picking that up if you were interested in it. So that's one of my honorable mentions. My other honorable mention I do actually have here with me, and that is Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. I read this last year actually, but almost 2 years ago now because it was a year and a half ago. It feels, when I think of the beginning of 2023, that feels like 2 years ago, you know? But it's only been a year and a half. But I guess if we're rounding, this is not important. Anyway, Heart of Darkness. I read this almost 2 years ago now. I actually listened to it on audiobook, and I bought this because I need to physically read it, which is probably why it's still just an honorable mention, because I haven't physically read it and I tend to have a different relationship with books when I listen to them versus reading them. But seriously, such a beautiful, haunting book about colonization in the Congo. Beautiful writing. Haunting story, haunting writing. So that's Heart of Darkness. So I just wanted to briefly mention those 2 honorable mentions. And then we have the top 5 favorite classics of all time. The first one, again, in no particular order, we have a book, again, that I don't have here with me, and that is the Orista by Aeschylus. And that is a tragic Greek play trilogy. So that is from a long ass time ago, is all I have to say. That's from antiquity, okay? So ancient times. And that story feels so modern. It feels, oh my god, I love the Orista. I love the Orista. I don't know which translation I have, but it's in the Penguin Classics edition. The Orista, we have Clytemnestra, we have Agamemnon, we have Iphigenia, we have Orestes, who's, you know, the son, which is, I guess, what the play is named after. We have Electra, who is their daughter, so they have 3 kids. Agamemnon was the guy who was in charge, basically wanted to take the Greeks to Troy to start the Trojan War. The whole story of the Orista is about how Agamemnon needed to sacrifice his daughter Iphigenia to get the winds to blow, you know, so the ships could go over to Troy so he could get his victory in Troy. Well, he did not tell his wife, Clytemnestra, what he was doing. He did not tell anybody what he was doing. He just basically took, I think what he did was he tricked them, Clytemnestra and Iphigenia, into believing that he would be sending her, she would be going to her wedding, but he actually took her to a sacrificial, like a sacrifice. And he sacrificed her to the gods so he could have the winds again to go to Troy. And he did not tell his wife and his daughter what was going on, so his wife, rightly so, is a little bit PO'd, you know? And he leaves for 10 years during the Trojan War. He's not a good dude, you know? He's taken female slaves to do what he will with them, you know what I mean? He comes back after 10 years, bringing Cassandra with him, who is one of the family members of the royal family of Troy. He brings back Cassandra, who is his concubine. His wife, Clytemnestra, the whole time he was gone, has been plotting his murder because she is mad. He killed her daughter. And I just think that Clytemnestra is the coolest, one of the coolest characters in all of literature. I think she's fascinating. I have a book. Let me grab it. I actually have this book on my shelves. It's been on my shelves for a little over a year now, by Themckenziekate, called Clytemnestra. I think it's a retelling of the same story, so I'm excited to get to that eventually. I've heard great things about Themckenziekate. But yeah, I think Clytemnestra is one of the absolute coolest characters in all of literature, and it is, how do I even word this? When I read plays from that time period, or tragic plays from that time period, and I'm thinking too of Medea by Euripides, alongside Clytemnestra for some reason. I think that they are both such powerful female characters, but when I read plays from that time period, specifically tragedies, I am just astounded by the male-female dynamic, on, like, in a small scale, like in family terms, and also large scale in societal terms. It is just fascinating. It is fascinating how these female characters, like these really strong female characters who are really cool, basically they have thoughts in their head, they have feelings, maybe they don't always make the best decisions, especially Medea. I don't know, she's like very contentious, but I think she's cool. I wouldn't do what she did, but I think she's an interesting character. They have such, I think, valid reasons for feeling the way that feeling the rage that they feel. You see female rage, really strong female rage in those stories, and they're portrayed as like the most evil characters. Oh my god, it is so fascinating, specifically in the Orista too, because the Orista is named after the sun, Orestes, and I'm about to spoil it for you right now, by the way, so if you don't want spoilers, click ahead. But the ending of the Orista is basically we take the sun, Orestes, because there's a curse on the house of Atreus, he basically, which is like people end up killing people within the family, is the curse on the house of Atreus because of something that happened a long time ago, you know, between brothers and father, anyway. But Orestes essentially is going to end this curse on the house of Atreus. But we take, I'm not explaining this properly, but at the end, we see the first Areopagus, which is essentially like a court of law. We see the first, oh my god, what is it called? Jury. Athena comes down and she's like judge and juror, all this stuff going on. So we see a law room, a courtroom, and Orestes becomes the hero of the story because he, after the mother Clytemnestra exacts her vengeance or revenge on her husband who killed the daughter, he's the bad guy, and you have Orestes who then kills his mother because that cannot do. The mother killed the father, so he needs to exact revenge or get vengeance for his father's death. And then these men are seen as like, yeah, like how could she kill her husband? And how could she kill my father? I need to take out this horrible human being, which is like crazy to me that that's how it ends, you know, and you see that decision being played out and all this moralizing going on in the this courtroom situation with Athena. Oh my god, it's fascinating. So I love the Orista. I love the Orista. Please read. Please read. Another, this is not Greek, this is Roman, but the Aeneid by Virgil, book 4 of the Aeneid, which is the book where you see Dido. I probably need to give the Aeneid another chance because I didn't really get anything too much out of the whole story, the rest of it, but book 4, the tragic Queen of Carthage, I think that's what it's called, we see Dido. Read that. read that. That's another one where it's just like a powerful female character who has feelings and thoughts and is very valid in her feelings and thoughts, in my opinion. But she's like turned into this horrible villain and seen as like this horrible villain, this terrible, that makes terrible decisions. Oh my gosh, because of her romantic relationship with Aeneas going on. And like Aeneas is seen as the hero. Oh my god. I just think stories generally around that time period are really fascinating with the male-female dynamic and female rage and feelings. So I love the Orista. Moving on. After that, we have Middlemarch by George Eliot. And often when I'm asked what my favorite book of all time is, this is what I will answer. Because, and I've only read it once, because I read it when I was 22. Okay, and I remember my whole experience. I read it in like 8 days. It's like 800, 900 pages. And that's like all I was doing for those 8 days. And it was fantastic. It was a fantastic experience. I cannot even begin to tell you how much I personally related to this story at the time that I read it. So I met this at the perfect time, and I do wonder what I'd get out of it if I read it now. Because I feel like, I mean, we're all the same person, but like, I feel like a completely different person. You know what I mean? So, than I was at the time that I read this originally. I would love to reread this, but I'm intimidated to reread. I'm like nervous to reread it because it's a book that I just deeply love so much. And you know when you have a story or a book, and I'm sure we all do, people watching this all do, you have a book that it sits somewhere deeper inside of you. It's not just a book that sits on your bookshelves, it's a book that sits literally inside of your chest. And it is a huge part, like, it's something that you hugely identify with, that really helped orient your worldview, the way that you view yourself, your feelings and opinions about life and yourself and things and people. That is what this is to me. So, it's a huge book. It's very dense. George Eliot is a very dense prose writer. Yeah, so it's not, I don't think that this is particularly easy and quick to read, but I think that it is so worth it. It is so philosophically dense on it, like on a sentence to sentence level. The thought digressions that our main character, Dorothea Brooke, goes into, the philosophical digression about the world and about morality and about ethics and about people and about what it means to grow up and what it means to be in romantic relationships and a relationship with yourself and your self-relationship with the world and what you're supposed to do in the world. I love this book. Let me tell you what the plot is, why don't I? So we follow a bunch of characters, mainly Dorothea Brooke, but we follow a large cast of characters that we see from a lot of young people's perspectives in this small town called Middlemarch. And we see a lot of progress going on in this town on a political level. We see the progress on an industrial level as well. And it is about these young people, this group of young people that are all kind of connected in some way. Their stories all converge in some way, but they all live in the same town, and they are all of marrying age. So we see them all embark on this journey where they're meeting people, getting married, and that's like in the beginning. And then we see how things actually play out, and it's just about them growing up, essentially. And I can't even, like, there's so much to this book, but I don't even know what else to say other than that. We just see these people growing up and being faced with reality versus their youthful idealizations. And I think that that's just so phenomenal. I love Dorothea Brooke. I love Dorothea Brooke so much. She is another one of my favorite fictional characters in all of literature and television and movies. The next book that we have is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I read this in high school, and I read this, I think, also when I was 22, so maybe the same year that I read Middlemarch. Boy, do I love Frankenstein. This is another book that is just so beautifully, poetically written. I cannot believe that Mary Shelley wrote this when she was like 19. It makes me really upset. It makes me upset, okay? But I'm glad it exists, so here we are. But this is the story of Dr. Frankenstein, who creates this monster out of body parts that he finds. And then we have this creature that he created, and it's about his relationship with the creature. We follow the perspective of the creature as he's just feeling so lonely in the world. There's no one else in the world like him. He's upset with his creator, so it's great allegory for, I feel like, depression, loneliness, obviously, bodily difference, being different, and just feeling lonely in the world. And I feel like it's a book that inspires a lot of empathy and a lot of compassion, and I think that it is just so beautiful. And there's one of my favorite sections of this book is when we have the creature essentially hiding out. It's kind of creepy, but like hiding out in a room connected to this house of this family, and he's just observing them for like months on end, living, and he becomes so attached to this family, but they don't know that he's there. And he's reading Paradise Lost, which is a really fascinating parallel. And he's just reading literature, and he's just learning about humanity, and he's just learning about people and connections, and he's wanting that for himself. It's just a book that inspires so much empathy and compassion. And I love Frankenstein. If you haven't yet read it, definitely read it. The next book that we have, I think these are the last two. These are the last two. We have A Confession by Leo Tolstoy. And this edition is the Penguin Classics edition. It has a confession and other religious writings. I'm specifically referring to a confession. I am not referring to his religious essays at all. I think that A Confession is published in the Penguin Great Ideas series just as a standalone, so that exists, but I just love these editions. I read this at a time that I really needed this. So this is essentially a nonfiction writing. It's essentially like an essay or whatever that Tolstoy wrote about depression, about his grappling with the idea of someone taking their own life, of him taking his own life, all about depression. A little bit about religion, of course, because it's Tolstoy, you know. But this book, I read this at the exact right time. Where I really resonated with it. It really comforted me, and it really gave great perspective on what it means to be alive and what it means to be alive. And someone who feels deeply and feels depression, and I think a lot of people could potentially get something out of this. The struggle with topics such as that and nonfiction writing and just philosophy in general is that people aren't, it's such a personal thing. Like, different people's philosophies might not always align. Like, it's not always going to align with the popular philosophy books, with every single philosopher that you read. That's just not how it works. And you don't want it to. You want to read things that challenge your own beliefs, that really magnify your own beliefs because you disagree with that person. So maybe this won't be for everyone, but this was for me. This was great for me. Maybe I'd recommend it if those are topics that interest you. And that's all I want to say about that. So, A Confession by Tolstoy. Last but not least, we have The Sorrows of Young Werther by Jonathan Wolfgang von Goethe. Goethe. I love saying that dude's name. I'm not very good at it, but I try. Okay? So The Sorrows of Young Werther. This was, funny enough, one of Napoleon Bonaparte's favorite books, which is just a fascinating little fun fact. I don't know what that says, but there you go. This is a slim epistolary novel, a one-sided epistolary novel where we're only hearing from our main character. young Werther. We're only hearing from him. But he is writing letters to his friend as he is on a trip in the countryside, and he is just such a romantic, Byronic character, and he's just in the beginning so in love with life and nature and humanity and himself and blah 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 blah. And then he meets this really young girl, and he just becomes fixated on her, and he falls madly and passionately immediately in love with her, and all of his romantic notions for the world are completely put into her, and then he falls into this massive depression and this like angstiness because he's in love with this young woman who is engaged to somebody else. It is not, what's the word when it's like, it's not reciprocated. That's the word. It is totally not reciprocated, and she marries somebody else. Spoiler alert, he's very depressed. At the end, he takes his own life, okay? This book is fascinating. Also beautiful, very beautifully written. So beautifully written. This dude is, I just think that he's such a fascinating. He's such a fascinating character psychologically to think about psychologically. Like, I just think he's fascinating. He's just totally a bipolar narcissist, in my opinion, and I think that this is such a fascinating psychological study of a narcissistic human being who's also, like, I'm talking about deeply angsty, like deeply angsty, and it is so good. So good. I think about this book all the time, and I read it such a long time ago, like years ago. I think about this book all the time. It's obviously another book I really want to reread. I can't even begin to tell you how much I think about this book. And I think that's wild because I've read a lot of books, you know? And so good. Oof, so good. Just read this. Read this. Those are my top 5 favorite classics pre-20th century. Please share with me what your favorite classics are pre-20th century. Let me know if you've read any of these, what you think of them. But yeah, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and goodbye.